4 planes crashed. The towers fell. 2,996 people died. A nation changed forever. I'm Caroline Martin. Join us as we remember the devastating events of September 11th, 2001. It was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, 8:45 a.m. An American Airlines Boeing 767 filled with civilians crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. 18 minutes later, a second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, flew into the South Tower. Watch and listen as we take you back 18 years ago to the day America changed.
Bro, get out!
The very first thing I shot was of the tower. I'm actually standing on our news vehicle, on the roof of it. We're on the West Side Highway.
What happened?
What? The building collapsed. Part of the building collapsed. So.
There has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan.
Literally, I was waiting at a table and I literally saw it seemed to be like a small plane. I just heard a couple noises. It looked like it bounced off the building, and then I just saw a huge ball of fire on top. And then the smoke seemed to simmer down, and it just, a lot of smoke was coming out, and that's pretty much the extent of what I saw.
Don't worry. Come on, where's your... Over here.
Looking out the window, I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea right now?
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh my God! Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God! It's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the East Tower.
Yes. Right in the middle of the building. And right now. That was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
You saw a plane?
Yes, I just saw a plane go into the building.
Why do you say that was definitely on purpose?
Because it just flew straight into it. Looks like it's about, I would say 15 floors lower than the first building, and there's now flames coming out of that building as well. They're both completely on fire.
To me, it sounded like a jet flying over. That's why I panned up. And then you see the tower collapsing.
Everything. I saw chaos. It's just chaos out here. It really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy.
We're going to re-rack the tape of when we were talking to you to see if we can tell.
Okay.
We can't see anything. We can't see a second plane in the picture. There we see the explosion.
The immediate impact of the events were felt by all, as a nation. As the world watched the United States fall victim to an organized series of terrorist attacks. Reportedly financed by the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization led by fugitive Osama bin Laden, the attackers were allegedly retaliating against America's support of Israel and continued presence in the Middle East, amidst a host of other factors. Victims who survived the attacks in New York did not escape all the devastation done that day. Statistical analysis and health data present a more in-depth picture of the short and long-term effects of the attacks.
3,000 people died and injured more than 6,000 others in the area. There were no survivors on the plane in which the event took place in. Since the attacks, airport security went up drastically, and they now question any suspicious characters.
A heartbreaking day in American history nearly 20 years ago, 4 terrorist attacks caused the collapse of the Twin Towers and damage to the Pentagon. While the impact has been felt all over the nation and the world, the immediate effects to the people around the wreckage have been devastating, so much so that they continue to affect Americans even to this day. Derek Subcheck, an athletic trainer and healthcare instructor at Allatoona High, reveals common diseases that plagued survivors of the attack.
The diseases that were going around at the time was more like upper respiratory infections, with all the dust and chemicals and pollutants and stuff in the air. People are having trouble breathing, getting asthma, so a lot of it was upper respiratory infections that were going on.
Research done the day of the attack showcases more specific information of the injuries suffered that day.
With a select group of people that showed that there's like 1,100 cuts, 200 burns, 80 fractures, dislocations, 69 concussions. But this was a small study of a group of a few thousand people that they surveyed that were there at 9/11. So that's some of the stuff that they were experiencing on that day.
He informed us about the diseases they could contract and mentioned that many of them were long-term.
Going along with the research I was finding, right away people were experiencing psychological issues like PTSD. They were having traumatic issues such as breathing. There were some concussions going on, burns, fractures, dislocations. In the long term, it turned into more hearing problems, emphysema, high blood pressure, heart disease, PTSD, cancer, lung disease. In 2016, I found a study that said there were 5,400 cases of cancer that was linked to 9/11, and there's been a lot more since then.
9/11 was a tragic event that impacted millions of Americans. Must we never forget the people who helped save others and the victims on that horrible day in America. Reporting for The Anchor, I'm Jasmine Glenn.
While the attacks in New York City filled every news broadcast, another plane hijacking was taking place. American Airlines Flight 77 circled over Washington, D.C., eventually crashing into the Pentagon, the United States military headquarters. Mr. Chuck Elwood recalls his own events of the day and the downing of the third plane.
We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
There was another major explosion. The building itself, literally the top of it came down.
Well, I remember that day very well. It was kind of a crystal clear morning, and I had just loaded my boy onto the little red school bus for his first day of school. And I got done taking all those pictures, and I went back inside to finish my coffee before going off to work. And I was actually watching the morning news when the plane flew into the tower. And at the time, we had thought, whoa, what a tragic accident. Maybe the pilot had suffered a heart attack or something, or there was just some cloudy fog or something that had just sort of caused a horrific accident. And so I sort of went off to work thinking it was just a normal day and that there was a tragedy in New York in terms of a plane crash. And then when I got to work, we were still watching the news, and I was sipping on my coffee and they were reporting, and then we saw the second plane actually fly into Tower 2. And when that happened, we kind of started to get the idea that, whoa, maybe this isn't just a horrible accident, because it'd be an awfully strange coincidence for two planes to fly into two different towers. And at that time, it was sort of like, what's going on? I remember the planes, and they were talking about planes being grounded. And then we sort of watched live on TV as the towers were burning, and then, to great surprise and obviously much horror, when the tower collapsed. And then it started to become real that there was going to be a serious loss of life here in New York. And then the second tower, when it collapsed. And as that was sort of unfolding, we'd got word that there were other planes that may have been, hijacked. And it got real for me, because that plane that went down to Pennsylvania that was purported to be going for the White House, and then there was also the one that struck the Pentagon. And that sort of brought 9/11, right into my, personal experience, because my sister was working with individuals at the Pentagon at the time. And so it went from, wow, this is a tragic accident in New York, to, holy smokes, is my sister going to be, wrapped up in this or involved in this, or maybe even, a fatality because of the actions of those attackers on 9/11. So it became real personal for me.
A fourth plane, United Flight 93, has a different story than the other planes. The flight was delayed that morning, so passengers had found out about the other attacks. They decided to fight back against the hijackers. The plane crashed in a field near Shakespeare, Pennsylvania, killing all 44 passengers. Back here in Ackworth, schools were rushing to respond to the horrific events. Many schools were not showing the news on TV screens in classrooms to not alarm students and family members. But as the events unfolded, it became clear that schools needed a reprieve for the day. Miss Andrea Stump remembers the Tuesday morning and the impact it made on her and her students.
September 11th, I was working at Durham Middle School as a 7th grade language arts teacher. It was a Tuesday, I do recall, and I think I was in my classroom about 9:30 the first time that I heard what was going on, and we were told specifically, don't turn on your televisions, we'll tell you what's happening in a little bit. They didn't want to scare the kids. Actually, just down the hallway, Jody Bittler is a teacher over at Durham, still a teacher there. She went around and told everybody in our department this is what was happening, and the kids were going to be leaving very soon to go home with their parents. You know, one of the reasons why they didn't want us to tell the kids is because we had a lot of parents who worked for Delta, worked down at the airport. So initially the reactions from the students were of concern for their own families. And you know, people who work downtown. So from a student perspective, they were, you know, they're 12 years old and they were instantly concerned that it was going to affect their family. But then again, it was so far away that some of them couldn't relate at all. I had to fly out the next year, so it wasn't immediate for me, but family members who were coming down, because I was pregnant with my son at the time, they were going to be flying down to come see the new baby and all of that. So it was a little bit scary for them. They were concerned that they were going to be flying into, of all places, the largest airport in the world, and they weren't sure of the security measures that were going to be taken. And definitely, if you were an uncomfortable flyer in the first place, it didn't make anything any easier. I've talked about this a number of times. I feel if you're going to find a good that came out of September 11th, because there's not much that did, but people looked each other in the eye a whole lot more, and not because it wasn't of a trust factor, but I feel like people were making sure that they were aware of their surroundings. You know, look a person in the eye, say hello, say good morning, be aware of your surroundings, know what is out there, because we were not paying attention as a country to what was going on around us. And so there's this, if I go English teacher on you, there's this great documentary film where they have the image of two planes flying into the World Trade Center, and the music in the background is What a Wonderful World. And that's kind of what we were like at the time. We were in this crazy little juxtaposed world where it was, you know, amazing to be an American and everybody wants to be an American. And then planes flew into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon and into a field in Pennsylvania, and we were oblivious to the fact that maybe we weren't looking around at other countries that didn't see us the way we thought we were.
The terrorist attacks of September 11th still affects us today. This day has been named Patriot Day to commemorate the anniversary. Memorials now stand where the towers once stood. Americans who lived through the event will always remember where they were. For many, it was the first time in their lifetimes that America was vulnerable. No, it was not the first incident of an outside attack on American soil, but the tragic events showed Americans that we weren't the shining example of freedom in everyone else's eyes outside of our nation. For those of us still here, this day will serve as a reminder that we are still one nation, indivisible. We will not allow terror to reign. We must continue to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you for joining us and remembering 9/11. We end our program today with a moment of silence in remembrance of all those who died 18 years ago.